So in board gaming, fantasy board gaming, the holy grail, the ultimate quest has always been to be able to take a role-playing game, a role-playing experience, the idea of a character, developing it, leveling, loot, exploration, the freedom of a dungeon master or a game master to say, I want to go here, I want to do this, I want to explore the dungeon, I want to leave the dungeon, I want to go to the town and look at all these things. Capture all that, all the rules crunching and things you have to know, capture all that and put it in a board game format. Put it in a box. And let's get rid of the dungeon master, let's get rid of the game master and play it. Legacy of Dragonholt. Does that happen? Has this captured it, or to what extent has it captured it? Now, I was really intrigued to pick up Legacy of Dragonholt from Fantasy Flight, because Fantasy Flight, I have to say, even if some of their games don't really hit my interest in terms of narrative, they have shown willingness to innovate. And even if that innovation did not go over very well in the community, it's always intrigued me. A couple of examples. Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay. A couple of years just peaked up right there. They're like, I knew Fritz was one of us. Third edition, I really enjoyed. Now just everyone, just absolute heresy. A Warhammer Fantasy Roleplay is a role-playing game that previously was based on percentile dice, D100 dice. Fantasy Flight comes in and is like, let's turn this into essentially a role-playing board game on there, and they used custom dice. Star Wars players are like, yeah, that's old news. But at the time, it was revolutionary on there. If we look at something like Runebound, it's a fantasy exploration game in Terranoth. It utilizes custom dice with terrain printed on it to handle your movement on the board. When it comes to combat for 3rd edition, you have these tokens, these runes that you cast, a lot of innovating concepts. Now that polarizes some people, but at the same time, it's like, hey, this is kind of neat because it's something we're familiar with, board gaming, but some unique mechanics. Sometimes hit, sometimes miss. So I knew going into Legacy of Dragonholt that Fantasy Flight was going to innovate. There was going to be something a little bit special in there. And being new to that, it's certainly not a new entry. I mean, the Sorcery series, I still love every now and then because there's so much gaming stuff crammed in my head. Every few years I run through the Sorcery series again, and I've forgotten most of it, especially in the later books on there, that it's new. Fabled Lands. There's a lot of this kind of game book, quest book type stuff that's out there. That's what Legacy of Dragonholt is, set in Terranoth. It's a game book or a game series, but it's taken to a different level. No spoilers here. Absolute no spoilers. There are ways that the game tracks time internally, tracks places you've visited, and if you visited certain places, there's kind of like a tracker sheet encoded in there. You visit a place, but then later you have another encounter and people appear at different times during the day. It does a really good job. I mean, an excellent job of making you feel like you're in, I guess, kind of like a Skyrim type game where you're in this world, you're navigating, you're doing things, you're developing your character, and things are on a different timer, even though it's scripted in the game. Both something like Skyrim and Legacy of Dragonholt, things are scripted, you know it, but it has the illusion of real time. It has the illusion of being in a living and breathing world done through the mechanics of the book and the game itself. No game master, dungeon master required. That intrigued me, and it does that really, really well. So I opened the box up, again, no spoilers, and I'm like, where's the dice? You know, I'm a dice guy. I like to roll the dice. I like to kind of gamble that away. You know, never tell me the odds and just play that. I love dice-based games simply because if there is a small chance at glory, I mean, I know dice are very swingy. And that's why a lot of people like Euros. That's why people love Gloomhaven. I love Gloomy also. But at the same time, I love rolling the dice on there. And let's just see, can I claim glory in that moment? So we're going to play a role-playing game without any dice. How are the mechanics handled on there? How are we going to resolve stuff? And I have to say Legacy does this really well in that you have character classes, you have various races, and this is of course set in Terranoth, but then you develop your character based on skills. and there's dozens of skills and dozens of subsets. And this does two interesting things, because now there's this idea of really expanding the idea of a character class out to where you can play anything you want. So you can initially specialize when you create your character. You could be like a magical rogue thief. So I could dump some skills into stealth, but also arcane magic. I could play a merchant and dump everything into trading and speechcraft and diplomacy and negotiation and have zero combat, zero type of stealth skills, zero type of magical skills on there. Pretty much whatever character you want to play, you can play. And the story will react to that in that when you have something to resolve or you have a decision tree that involves skills, it's going to say, hey, do you have these skills at these levels, at these points? If so, how do you want to proceed? And then go to this part in the game book and track it from there. And it's diverse enough in that you really get to play through and explore a lot of different things with that on the characters as a group. So certainly being a game book, you're going to have to read through it. If you're part of a group that is used to playing role-playing games, you can nominate someone to be the game master in that they will read from the book. I've played through where I'm the primary reader. We've also played through where someone will read a little bit, then we'll pass the book to the next person and we'll kind of go around the table. Certainly, however you want to resolve that based on comfort level and what people feel like doing. But unlike a board game, someone has to read the modules and read the choices on there. But in terms of decision making, it's really interesting because there's an activation system, and this activation system prevents alpha players, prevents kingmakers, prevents rules lawyers. And we see this sometimes in role-playing games a little bit. We see it in board games all the time where we're supposedly a team playing our characters, but one person is going to just kind of bully the other players into being like, well, this is the best move. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. You know, you want to do this. This is where we want to go. And some people listen to that. Some people don't listen to that. It can create a little tension. We see this in role-playing games. Legacy handles that correct. Again, a very, very intriguing mechanic in that everyone on the table, if you're playing solo, it doesn't matter. If you're managing multiple solo characters, it doesn't matter. But if the three of us are playing and I make my decision of what we want to do at this moment to resolve, I'm done. I can't now, next time there's an action, I don't get to pick. I ultimately don't get to pick how the party is going to resolve it. I can offer some influence, I can offer some suggestions, but once I've activated, I'm done until everyone else has activated in there. So it is very unique in trying to prevent the kingmaker mechanic on there, the alpha player, the rules lawyer, the neckbeard, all kind of the worst of the worst that everyone's afraid of. This makes it very, very friendly and open to approaching players on there. It's very kind of unique and interesting from that. So now we get into the heart of it. And again, no spoilers. And this, for me, is where the game really breaks out. And then, of course, we'll talk replayability, because for something that's in a box that seems one and done, there is a surprising amount of replayability in there with Legacy. So you go in and there's, again, no spoilers, there's a little bit of an introduction, sets up the scenarios, sets up everything, and then you arrive in the town of Dragonholt. And in this town, there's a map, and there's all places you can explore. There's all subquests. There's all characters, NPCs that you can interact with that go throughout the game, and you can pick when and where and how, and they're there at different times and places doing different things, all tracked by this kind of matrix that where it records things. And then from there, so that's kind of the place you always return to, and you have all these quests. But then from there, the machinations and the various books, additional game books in there, break out to specific quests that are happening in and around the town. So you really feel like, I mean, the last time I felt this way was when I was initially exploring the world of Greyhawk, when we were playing Temple of Elemental Evil, where you had a home base and you knew it was involved in the various cults and the Temple of Elemental Evil, even before you knew it was the actual Temple of Elemental Evil. you felt like the area was living. You felt like you were playing in a really unique area. Okay, replayability. You've got the main quest, you've got the sub-quests, so it's not something that you're going to be able to run through realistically on the first time. There's multiple different endings. There's dead end endings on there, and there's some endings that just take things in a completely different direction. So you've got multiple playthroughs just on that. Then you've got different characters to explore, different skill sets. I mean, you could literally go through as a trader and a diplomat and a negotiator. My last character that I played through was very DS9 inspired. I was playing essentially like a Wayun type character, a Vorta, where there's going to be no combat. It was going to be all diplomacy with that. You could do a playthrough. Certain things are going to be closed, certain avenues on there, and you might not pick up all the story points, but you can play any way you want to play. So then you get to explore the game world through that. And then there's a sub-game world of achievements where you can play this through your first playthrough, multiple playthroughs, or another playthrough where you go through and you try and unlock, do this, do that, talk to this person, meet X number of characters from the Terranoth and the other games that are incorporated in this gaming universe. So it almost becomes just an achievement-based game. There's a lot in the box on there. And the really great thing is you can pick it up and put it down and pause and stop literally in a moment. Just make a note of what page you're on. So with a group, it lends itself really well for a filler. It lends itself really well as a solo type game where you can play and kind of go through. Doesn't take up a ton of space, has a couple of maps and adventure cards and item cards. But compared to some of the other Fantasy Flight titles out there, it's not a table hog. My only question, and this is where it comes back to Fantasy Flight taking risks and being revolutionary in their games. Expansions. I'm a completionist. I want expansions. I mean, I'm Fantasy Flight's target audience on there. It's just insane. I mean, Descent 2nd Edition, we got to stop the train and I got to get off sooner rather than later on there. Legacy has such an amazing mechanic and a lot of possible unfinished places it could go. I've been hoping for expansions on this. I don't think as of this podcast and this vlog post it's going to happen. I know the writing team has kind of moved on. Fantasy Flight, I guess it didn't perform as expected, or maybe it was just an experiment to introduce their Oracle system. I don't think it's going to be continued on, but it would be amazing to get some expansions. That now turns it over to the community. Is the community going to create some print and play expansions? Are there going to be some other modules on there? It's really perfect. It's really ripe for that expansion. Your thoughts, if you have the game, if you're thinking about playing the game and purchasing it and adding it to your collection, again, no spoilers, but I hope I've given you some perspective to answer that ultimate question we started with. Does it work as a role-playing game in a box, and what place would it have in your gaming collection?